Hi, this is Tom from Nightingale Games talking about War Room, a Larry Harris game, and today I'm talking about the territory cards and the card holders. So, before you, these are some of the territory cards. There's 131 total cards, and these are used to keep track of who owns which territory besides the little nationalist flag that is placed in captured territories on the map. And you keep them in card holders like these. This is China with the news sticker. And so I'm going to show you, you come with one of these for each nation, and then there's these black ones that also come. There's 4. This is for spillover. Japan starts with a lot, for example. And so how you use them is first you want to fold up the sides like this, just a little bit. And this is so the cards don't tip over to one side or the other. And then you'll see there's these little perforated lines here. Don't tear those out. Just slip the card in like this. And then you bend up the sides. There's the back. And you can hold the sleeves like this. And during gameplay, I like to lay it flat and then keep the storage box right on top so it's nice and compact. I know that space is a concern for the game. When I push up the tabs, I use my finger to push up from the back, which is a little easier to insert rather than trying to pry them up from the front. So just gently push from the back and then slip the card in. Now these should be wide enough for sleeves as well, just barely. So that's how they fit. And a few other people have talked about how to arrange them. You don't even need to put the ones in that don't have resources. It's mostly for lining up and counting your resources. You can keep all the other nations you might control, which have no resource income at all, in a separate pile or on a separate sleeve. So I'm going to talk about some other little details about the cards. Some have already been well discussed and are obvious, and others are quite subtle and I haven't seen discussed yet and are not in the rules. So to start with, there's the flag on the left, the ID with a black background. This matches the identification on the global map. And then there's the stress value with a white background. And if you lose control of the territory, you hand the card over to the nation which captured it, and then they take it and keep it in their card sleeve. The next, on the front, you'll see the 3 different resources: oil, iron, and OSR. And this is how many you gain during the income step. And on the flip side is embattled. So if you flip to this side and you get 1 reduced income. And you may have noticed the pattern is that you lose 1 resource of the most valuable type. So you see that this is 3, 4, 6. If you flip it over, oil is the most valuable from left to right, 2, 4, 6. And you'll see in some there's a shadow. If it goes from 1 to 0, there's just a slight shadow where the resource would have been. So you can predict without actually flipping the card what will be lost if that territory becomes embattled. So that's one feature. Well, let me just show you another example of that. Here's Manchuria. So you see 2, 1, it has no oil, but the next most valuable is iron. So it lost the iron on its embattled side. whereas normally it has 3. Okay, some other little graphic elements of the cards. You'll see that the special nations, which since the game starts in early 42, they are under control of the enemy. So you can see this very light yellow border, whereas normally Japan doesn't have that. This indicates that if liberated, China will regain control. So, for example, if the U.S. recapture Manchuria, the U.S. don't get to control it. China regains control of that territory. There's also Belarus and the Ukraine, which have that, which will the Soviets will retain control of those as opposed to the liberator. If, say, the British liberate the Ukraine, the British will not control the Ukraine. If the Soviets are still in the game, they will control it. So those are indicated with little border lines on the title. Just a little subtle graphical hint there. Other little icons. You see these little infantry. Those are also on the map, and that's just a reminder that that is a legal place where China may create new infantry as the special ability that they have during Phase 7 production. Any industry, any territory that has an industry has this little icon on the front and back, which just indicates that it is an industrial site. The fact that there's 2 smokestacks has no relevance. It's just a little mini icon for that it is an industry. If you want to know the number of smokestacks, all of the industries match the strategic value. For example, in the western United States, there should be 8 smokestacks. And these smokestacks limit the number of units that you can manufacture in that particular territory or deploy in that particular territory. So there's some other little symbols. So in the western United States, you see this little star with a P. And those little stars, if it's blank, for example, in the eastern United States, that indicates that it's a capital in the standard global game. If it is not blank but has a little P in it, that means it's a capital in the Pacific scenario. And Hawaii has one, and that's just a reminder of the scenario goals for the 2 and 3 and 4, 4-player scenarios. So P stands for Pacific. Here's one that has a little C in it, which shows that it belongs to China. So it's China's capital, but it starts the game captured by Japan. China's capital isn't a requirement or objective in the standard games, but it's just there for flavor, I guess, or historical reference. Other elements that others have pointed out are there's the starting setup for all, which is the same for all the scenarios, just some are included and some aren't. And so you can see the command number and the different types of units. If there's air units, they're indicated as well. And also if there are naval units, they're indicated, and also there's a box with a location as to which sea region they begin the game in. So the land units start where the red arrow is pointing, and the naval units start where the blue arrow is pointing. And it says the ID of the region as well. So this is the 2nd Naval Command, the 13th Air Command, and the 69th Land Command. And you'll notice there's a pattern with the numbering scheme of the different command. So 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 is naval commands. I don't think we use 10. And then 11 through 19 are air unit commands. And then 20 up to 99 are land commands. And then in the hundreds range, only China and Italy are used. And that just differentiates them a little bit. If, for example, the Axis are controlling both Germany and Italy, it's helpful to have the numbering scheme fairly different so you can identify. Another little feature is these little marks off to the left. You may have wondered what those are for or figured it out. That identifies which scenarios this card is relevant. So in the back of the book, it lists each territory that is used for that particular scenario, but you can also refer to these little codes on the left side of the backs of the cards. So for example, you can see the Eastern United States is involved in the global scenario and the European scenario, but not the Pacific or the Eastern Front. Whereas the Western United States is in the global, not in the European, but is in the Pacific and not in the Eastern Front. So it goes from top to bottom: global, European, Pacific, Eastern Front scenarios. And so that's just a little handy dandy code. Other things that have already been mentioned, but I wanted to talk about, in some cases, the starting units do not belong to that particular nation. For example, U.S. forces start in New Zealand, even though it's controlled by the British Commonwealth. And that's true for other cards, such as Libya, which has both. So German forces and Italian forces, that's why there's two little arrows, begin the game in Libya. And finally, I wanted to talk about the subtle distinction. The neutral territory cards are gray, which they look a little bit like the Germans, as people have mentioned. The lighter gray cards are the standard neutrals, and then you'll see this slight color difference, sort of a slight hint of green, minty, so you can see the difference there. Those start the game as pro-allied, and there's also a little blue border around the ID box if you're having trouble seeing the difference between the gray and the mint. So the game does not start with any pro-Axis neutrals in the game. And then lastly, there is one errata in which has also already been mentioned, but Sicily starts the game with 1 infantry, not 2. And so this is available if you want to print on BoardGameGeek. There's an image file if you want to print a little patch for this card. You can also simply refer to the command token, which has little sticker codes on them, and that is correct. So the command token is correct, while the setup for the card is wrong for T4 Sicily. That's the only errata discovered so far for the setup. So that's it. If you have any questions or other little details about the territory cards that I forgot, you can mention it in the comments. Thanks.